Hi, my name is Grace Buhan, and I did my research paper on the deforestation in Costa Rica and its consequences that it has not only on the biodiversity around it, but also how it comes full circle and impacts humans as well. So to start this project off, I wanted to talk about how Costa Rica, even though it's a small country in Latin America, has been used as a model for other countries when it comes to the stopping of deforestation acts, and not only that, but just the reforestation and what it takes. Costa Rica was the first tropical country to do those things as well. And so this paper and this project goes over the impacts that deforestation has had and what the Costa Rican government has done to try to reverse it. So deforestation is the clearing, destroying, and otherwise removal of trees through the deliberate, natural, or accidental means. And this was found on an Oxford Languages website. And yeah, this can happen anywhere as long as it's trees. It doesn't have to be solely limited to rainforests. My project just is on Costa Rican rainforests. So going into kind of a little bit of background on rainforests, they're tall, dense jungles with hot and humid climates and lots of moisture due to the vast amounts of precipitation that it receives per year. And the rainforests are home to more than half the species found on this planet, and they provide clean air, food, shelter, water, and even medicines. However, due to the deforestation acts, some animals, such as like the Bengal tiger or mountain gorillas, are vulnerable to extinction due to their homes being taken away. And not only are the animals at risk, but the soil is as well. So basically, when you cut down trees, you're exposing the soil below to harsh climates, weathering, or the exposure to animals. And essentially, what happens is the nutrients is taken out of the soil, and the soil loses its fertility, which means it will be harder and harder for vegetation to grow, which means that the air won't be getting filtered and there will be more pollutants in the air. And so to shift to more of a Costa Rica specific trees in the rainforest, there are the ceiba trees, which are found in many Costa Rican rainforests, and they are used for a number of things. So one of the things that the ceiba tree produces is a seed, and this seed is a light, airy, fibery, resistant, buoyant, and insulating sort of fiber. And so as you can imagine, humans use this a lot for insulations such as clothing. And as well as the seed, it also produces paper. The ceiba tree wood is not exactly strong enough to hold screws or nails as much as other woods are. So it's mainly used for paper production. On the opposite side of this concept is the Guanacaste tree. The Guanacaste tree is not harvested like the ceiba tree, but it's planted by pastures to help shade livestock like cows from the harsh rays of sun and temperatures that can get over 90 degrees. It's also planted next to like coffee farms to help shade the coffee beans to help protect them from weathering. So to get into a little bit of the history of Costa Rica and its deforestation, we're gonna look at 1970s and 1990s in Costa Rica. This was when they had one of the highest deforestation rates in Latin America. Their trees were being cut down at a rapid rate to be used for lumber or to clear pastures for agricultural reasons or to raise livestock. And this meant a heavy increase in CO2 in the areas. However, today the Costa Rican government has intervened over the years and has been able to reforest and essentially transform the land that was once filled with rainforests. So 60% of the land was able to be transformed back into its original state. And economics was a huge part of this turnaround. For example, the Payment for Ecosystem Services scheme, or otherwise known as the PES scheme, was a strong tool that was used in the reforestation. So essentially what this proposal was to help initiate a closer relationship with the farmers. Farmers were extremely helpful in this turnaround. They were tasked to do a number of things in exchange for money. For example, $64 per hectare was given to farmers if they did some of these things, and I'll go into these things. So harvesting only certain areas of timber, as we've discussed previously in this class, the management of animal fields or feeding grounds, or the management of cutting down timber is extremely important in regards to soil erosion and the fertility of the soil. Protecting watersheds was another thing that farmers were tasked to do. And essentially, protecting watersheds comes down to reducing the amount of pollutants that enter aquifers or lakes or rivers. And farmers can do that by increasing a focus on the placement or management of animal feeding operations, which could potentially lead to a lot of exposure on the topsoil, which again leads to less fertility. They were asked to watch the amount of plowing they were doing on the fields to make sure there was no over plowing, which again leads to soil erosion. And then the improper and excessive placement of pesticides was also on the list of things that farmers were tasked to have a increase of focus on. Another thing that farmers were tasked to do was to mitigate carbon dioxide emissions. IKI, the International Climate Initiative, proposed that we wean more off of the use of fossil fuels and focus more on renewable energy sources. So that was one way that farmers could help, was to mitigate carbon dioxide emissions. And ultimately, all of these points would lead to the conservation of biodiversity. By addressing the potential dangers to, let's say, the soil or to watersheds, animals' living conditions and drinkable water would lead to less diseases, less fatalities, and promote more growth. And so because of these changes that the Costa Rican government has made, there has remained a strong interest in Costa Rica as a tourism spot. Over 3 million people come to Costa Rica, and of those 60% come to see its nature and wildlife. And due to this, Costa Rica employs around 200,000 people just to tourism alone. Juan Robolino, who's an expert in environmental economics at the University of Costa Rica, made a comment about how it could be a dangerous cycle if there is less tourism in Costa Rica, which would lead to a decrease in the emphasis on the overall maintenance or preservation on the environment, which would lead to overall less revenue, which eventually would lead to less funding going towards the conservation. And so with that, Costa Rica is a part of what is known as the Bond Challenge. The Bond Challenge is a global movement to restore 150 million hectares of degraded and deforested land by 2020, and this was said by the International Union for Conservation of Nature. So countries like Guatemala, Mexico, Rwanda, Cameroon, and India are all countries that have joined Costa Rica in the fight to reforest land. However, other countries might not be as successful as Costa Rica due to its level of stability in economics and its political arenas. The OECD, otherwise known as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, was tasked to analyze Costa Rica on their strengths and weaknesses within their government. What they found was that Costa Rica had a strong track record in their economic and political stability, and they credit one of the one of the reasons that they credit this is the strong emphasis on the monitoring and evaluation of the Costa Rican government systems. So they're always rechecking to make sure what's in place is working, and if it's not, what are the steps that can be done to make sure that it works. And another reason for the success of their economic and political stability is the focus of citizen participation. And Bianca Jaeger, who is an ambassador of the Plant and Pledge campaign, spoke on this issue and talked about how viewing deforestation and its consequences as a human rights issue really helped people sort of wake up and realize that just planting trees is not going to cut it. No pun intended. And so because of these things, Costa Rica and hopefully many more other countries will improve on its renewability, sustainability, and conservation of their wildlife, because deforestation does affect more than just the wildlife. It affects humans. And since the late 90s, Costa Rica has started to see many results from their reforestation efforts. And it serves as a continuous reminder and inspiration to other countries as well. Thank you so much.